Welcome to Radio Dispatch Video. On today's show, the pros and cons of growing up online.
So, Molly, you wrote a story for the New Inquiry, an essay about the pros and cons of having a life lived and documented online.
I did, and especially, this is something that there's so much cultural anxiety about it by adults towards youth, about the damage they do to themselves by documenting their lives on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and whether they're creating a negative record that will be held against them as they apply for colleges or as they become politicians, which is like always the hypothetical. Like, what about when they run for president?
But then you also talk about some of the pros.
Yeah, the pros, I think, the main pro is that adults really like to completely erase their childhood and their youths and create a real distance between who they are as adults and who they were as young people. And I think that maybe having all of the textual evidence that the internet creates might make adulthood seem less distant from youth.
One of the central images that you use in the piece is this idea of tattoos, and you said that you wanted to get a tattoo partially because it's a commitment to who you are at a certain time.
I really expected to get a lot more pushback about my wanting a Bright Eyes tattoo as a 19-year-old. Surprisingly, nobody gave me any shit for that. But yeah, I think that the rationale for not getting a tattoo is always like, oh no, but when you're older, oh my god, how embarrassed you'll be by your young self. Why live your life in caution for like your future more conservative self? It's not to say that you shouldn't like think ahead, obviously, but the way that adults talk to youth, it's constantly, I mean, our entire approach to youth is think ahead, think ahead, think ahead, think like an older person. I also think that a lot of the project of adulthood is teaching people to like suppress the way they feel about things because like the world is unfair and you have to get used to it. When kids experience something that's unfair, they're like, that's messed up, it shouldn't be that way. Instead of that urge being the one that we say, keep that, like hang on to that for as old as you get. Instead, it's often the opposite, and it's like, the world is unfair, adapt and get used to it.
And the sooner you get used to it, the better off you'll be.
Right. It probably comes from a protective place. Adults are like, young people, you will be destroyed if you don't learn how to cope in this extremely unfair, unjust, and like emotionally bankrupt world. And like, how does the world change? Like, I don't mean to be all children are the future here. The world changes when we recognize injustice and decide that like it is okay to have an emotional reaction to that and that we don't want that anymore. Like, youth has always been part of like social justice movements for that exact reason. But so much of what I was trying to get at in the story about growing up on the internet is the ways that adulthood tries to kind of like manage the kind of hope or optimism or energy of youth. The power of youth is like its power to challenge those things about adulthood.
And I think that is a pretty good motto for Radio Dispatch.
Harnessing the power of youth to ruin pragmatism.